So again, the talk is on the technological use of the and traditional use of yucca. And like I said, I'm on the screen. The first photograph is a narrow leaf yucca, and as I was explaining earlier, even these dead and down leaves down here, if they're not, here's an insect bite. If they're not too bitten up or broken, we will gather those and use those as well. Yucca doesn't necessarily have to be harvested green to make beautiful items, but in some creations it does help. Um, so dry shelter assemblages in this part of Pueblo lifestyles, they were using wood, reeds, everything that you could think of, bulrush, uh, cattails, anything that was long and could be used as expedient or um, that wasn't, even though it could only be used once or twice, it was still useful for all of us, and we wouldn't know about any of these items. And that's the advantage of being an archaeologist, because in the cave structures, like where I'm from, Santa Clara Pueblo has several cave 8 shelters in the Puye cliff dwellings, and Hewitt was able to find sandals and mats and textiles, and in Tonkoe the same, and also High Rolls Cave had the largest collection of yucca sandals. And without these items for me to look at and study, I wouldn't have been able to replicate a lot of the products or, produce a lot of the items that I take out into the education outreach programs. Um, and again, we'll talk about this freeze thaw cycles and how it works for us to extract fiber a lot easier than other conventional ways that the prehistoric people perhaps did. They probably had an easier way of doing it. So not knowing that, we rely on experimentation. Here's some of the items that are found in cave 8 structures. These are coming out of Blanding, Utah. You'll see a variety of woods. You see yucca, turkey feather blankets. There's even human hair, everyday items that we use here in your house. We all need a bowl to carry or serve things. These are baby cradle boards. Again, when you make something, it's always distinct, male, female. Uh, it's, there's always an item that distinguishes it as a boy cradle board or a little girl's cradle board. So this is a little girl's, and the little boy has the leg opening. So, she has to, he just lets it shoot out. I don't know how else to say it. But anyway, all the Comanche cradle boards were made the same way. This is a reed, actually, like a yucca stalk from one of the southern yucca plants that have the nice robust stalk. Again, this is oak. This is also an oak stay. They're picked green, and then at the top up here, it's heat treated and bent. Now this bend is symbolic of a bear claw. And if you were to look at this on the edge, there's striations. So that striation is, like I said, the bear paw itself, the claw mark. And it was used for a lot of things. And if they had shown the bottom down here, there's a small flat pointed edge that was also used for planting stick. And it's beveled at the right depth to place a corn seed in. So all of these items are, not only are they beautiful, but they each have a purpose. I got hit a lot with one of these. That's what, we call grandma's poking stick. It stands by the doorway because it also protects the doorway. But if you weren't behaving, you got it too. So here we have two different yuccas. These are what I use primarily. This is my favorite yuccas. So we have the large common name is Spanish dagger, Yucca baccata. We have the narrow leaf yucca, and this one is used for sandals, a higher gauge of rope. It has a long thread in it, where this one is a softer, more desirable textile that you can wear against your body, tump bands against your foreheads. Again, I'm showing the different varieties of materials that are gathered. Cotton, of course, comes in from the south, and it's traded up here. Indian hemp, which I'm working with now and learning how to extract. It is a bark fiber. And the monarch butterflies will eat and drink that sap that comes out of it. My grandma used to use that milkweed. It's milkweed, basically. So my grandma used to use the milkweed for people who had psoriasis. And if you've ever touched that sap, that white sap, it's sort of like a rubber. And she said it would seal that wound, or wherever that sore was, so they wouldn't itch it. Human hair was used, and dog hair. So as we go down through some of these items, I'll show you which ones are dog hair and which ones are human hair. And again, we talk about how useful these plants are. They're edible. If you know them well enough, you can start eating the flower, then wait for the pod, then use this for an expedient arrow. You come over here, you have a banana fruit that's full of sugar. You don't even have to cook it sometimes. And then the heart of it is also edible. And this one you want to use for shampoo, not this one. This one will make your scalp itch, and this one won't. And babies are bathed when they're first born, their third day into this world. They're given a yucca shampoo on their heads. And what the old ladies do, why they do that, is because they don't want that baby to grow up bald-headed. So I'm sorry, Jim. Just kidding. So here's another variety that's down south. Remember, I talked about these long seed pods. These are what they would use these as an expedient addle dart. And addle is a weapon, and it's a stick that's a throwing stick, but they would use these as an expedient dart for hunting. And this is bear grass, and you're getting food, shampoo, spears, and we talked about that earlier, from these fibers. This is desirable because of the length, for basketry, for mats, for just the length of the string itself. And they would make flutes out of this shaft as well. But when you have one and you need a good walking stick, these are excellent. But once they get wet, then they will frag and everything else apart. So if you want to keep it forever, you can shellac it, or you can keep it out of the wet. So in working with yucca, I started having this desire to learn footwear. And so I'm accomplished this design here. I can make this, I can make that pair of sandals in about an hour. There's another one that's even more expedient, and it's not pictured here, and I can do that one in 15 minutes. So this is the narrow leaf yucca that I spoke about, the long desirable leaves. This plaid starts actually from right here in the middle, and then it goes here and I hide, and then it goes back up to the top. This is in also from Blanding, Utah, from the Edge of Cedars Museum. I got to handle this one, and what I was trying to figure out is where are they hiding the extension into another leaf? Where are they putting it together? And it's a really interesting way of doing it. So this is on the back burner for right now. I'm also an accomplished weaver of this style here, and I have enough cordage spun and rolled to create this one. So everything's in an experimental phase. What's going on here is is showing basketry. So this whole leaf is going to be pulled off all the way to the heart. It's a beautiful leaf, actually. And so this weave starts here in the middle. So it's usually under 1/2, under 2/1, under 1/3. It depends on what design you want. It's so meditative to weave yucca baskets. Right now is the time to gather sumac branches like this one, and you're bending and heating with your hands and bending and then creating these rings. So she will determine how much yucca she needs based on the size of these rings. It's not making the mat first and then putting the ring. So the mats are laid out flat. It's an interesting way of sewing it together. But basketry is something we talked about, maybe having a class or even a yucca sandal class. In some of the cave 8 structures, you find yucca fiber that's ready to go. So you always have these bundles. So if somebody's coming through a cave, you see a pile of plaited sandals. They're all different sizes. And I think what they're doing is, as they know everybody's traveling, and that's like the whole Motel 6, and everybody goes in there to sleep. And then if they blow out a shoe, they can go in and find one that's their size, create the tie for it, and go on their way. And look how beautiful. Yucca is so interesting to work with. So you've got it here, combed out and cleaned, and then spun on the thigh and creating cordage. There's several ways of cleaning it and preparing these yucca. This is roasting of a heart of the yucca. Remember I said the whole yucca base. So this is the Spanish dagger. Over here you've got the plantain or the cactus. They're all delicious. But I don't beat it. I scrape it. I've pit baked it. If there was a fire there, and I use my mother's fireplace to create a lot of the things, but I've also learned that my oven just works just as well. So simmering in a turkey roaster is what we use at the office, Dr. Blimlin and I, and we will simmer the yucca leaves for anywhere from 2 to 3 days and just keep adding water until I can get my thumbnail and just peel the leaf clean and the string is exposed. I talked about freeze thaw. This was an accident. One time it snowed, the freezer went out, so Dr. Blumen and I were rushing to take the leaves out, and we put them out in the back where there was piles of snow, and thinking, well, once the electricity goes back on, or we can salvage our plants. And well, that didn't happen, and most of our yucca thawed out. And then when the freezer went on, we said, well, it should still be good. So we refroze it. And then when we went to do an outreach program, we pulled the refrozen, ones we had put in there that thawed out and froze again. And they were the easiest things to clean. So what Dr. Blemlin said was the crystals of the ice went in and broke up the, it's like this, I call it gunk. Pam has a scientific name for it though. That's inside the yucca. And it just broke it all apart, and you could get a toothbrush and literally just go over it, and it would just be nice cordage. Yucca has one of the highest tensile strengths of all the fibers. Cotton, it goes past, surpasses cotton and jute and other materials. Tensile strength is the resistance of a material to breaking under tension. So when REI came in and they experimented with our yucca cordages, this is some of the data that they gave us. And we were trying to, trying to get me to explain miles. So here's Bacata, which has the longest. What it means is they would get a string of the yucca and pull it and pull it and pull it. And in theory, it would stretch 29 miles before it would break. So we put it down as this. So we're glad they did the study because it helped us see how long and how strong the fibers would be if someone were to climb up and down, because there was an experiment that National Geographic did using 900 feet of yucca cordage. And here's the REI machine testing the cordage, and it broke at 500 pounds. So one leaf can give you 3 feet of cordage. Depending on how you want your rope, depending on how thick you want it, you're going to gather that fiber and roll it on your thigh. And this young man here in this article, I got to meet him in Grants, and he was impressed with actually had 3 professional rock climbers use that rope. So we weren't sure what was going to happen, but the idea was trying to find out how they were getting in and out of the corn bins that were placed on a 90-degree face of a rock of a cave. And people would say, well, they're using pegs to climb up and down. But what it was yucca and a series of knots in the yucca that where they were able to go up and down safely. I say safely. It's a beautiful straw colored, this yucca. It's like hair, and depends on what plant you're using to get the softness. Right now I'm experimenting with the leftover after cleaning. So all that sludge that I call goop, it has fiber in it. So that goop, what they were using, when you go into a cave 8 structure and you see those beautiful rock art, red, yellow, sometimes green pigments still on the rock, they were mixing that clay or that pigment with the yucca goop and then putting it on the wall. So we're trying to, if you just put the pigment on the wall itself, it'll go away. But that yucca string absorbs into the rock and sticks, and so does the color. And I, speaking with Hopi, they're the ones who were saying that's how they keep a lot of those kachinas, painted. Yucca has so many uses. So I'm experimenting with a yarn, and hopefully I'll accomplish, because we're finding yarn in some of the museum assemblages. It is a 2-ply cord, which is primarily used for almost all the artifacts or all the articles in the cordage. So there's an S-spin, which is if you were to put your hand on your lap and move your hand forward, that would create an S-spin. The Z twist is if you put your palm of your hand on your knee and moved backwards, that would create the Z twist. The Navajos, when they weave their wool and they have to use thigh spinning, they will never use an S spin. It is against their religion, but they will use a backward Z twist. So for fine threads, you can do about 30 feet in an hour if you're a consistent spinner. And the length of one leaf is less than 2 feet sometimes. If you're lucky, you get that nice 3-footer. So you have to put the yucca strands together, and we do what's called drafting. So we'll get the leaf and we'll pull, and then we'll add, come back with a Z twist, and then go forward with an S twist, and we're adding to the dimension or the length of the fiber that we're using. So here you're seeing paint brushes, so probably using cave 8. I was impressed with the bowstrings because I'm a bow maker as well. So a lot of times a sinew, I was taught to use sinew. But when I went to the Smithsonian and I was looking at the Comanche weaponry, there was a Comanche bow, a long bow, and it was strung with yucca cordage. And there were several repairers mixing the sinew and the yucca to repair a bow. So it's probably just an expedient repair, but they had confidence enough in that bowstring to use it as a weapon. And so that kind of impressed me about yucca. You'll get fine threads, and you can use a bone needle and sew garments with this yucca as well. And I use all bone tools when I work with yucca. And there's a reason, because the steel tools, that if you looked at the metal awls under a microscope, you would see small upraises or barbs on the metal tool, but on the bone it just goes so smooth with the basketry and making of the shoes or weaving. So in this photograph you're seeing string nets. This is yucca, I can tell, and these nets were used for gathering, mainly for snares, for rabbits, for mice, and for birds. So birds and mice, they were both eaten, and certain feathers were used for ceremonial purposes. So they probably went out and hunted during certain times of the year. And I had a long talk with my niece today about, what do you mean we ate mice? I said, yeah, they were, come in and eat your corn, come in and chew on everything you had. So the solution was to eat them, but they would save the pelt. And then they would take the little deer mouse pelt and make it one long piece of material. So from a small pelt like this, you could do it in a circle and get a nice strand of fur, and then wind it around yucca cordage, and then weave it, and they were making cloaks for medicine men. These sandals are twined. So these are hand twined sandals. So the cordage is created first, and then they're finger woven, and some of the looms are staked into the ground. This one's hung, you can see where the string that held it, and as they wove down, they're also creating a 3D pattern at the bottom. So everybody in the village had a different or pattern design at the base, and if it was a family, they would have the same design. You can see these 3D raised patterns. It is a loop over a loop over a loop. So this is a lot of material time here to create one of these, but I'm going to take a shot at it. So wish me luck. One of the ideas that Ben Baldonero, who did a large study on yucca sandals, told me was, what did I think they made different patterns on these sandals? And I said, well, sometimes you go out you leave the village and you go for a while, and maybe they can't find you, so this gives them an idea of which way you went, so they could track you if you had that pattern on the bottom of your sandal. And he agreed. Well, but you know, I think that all the designs and patterns are beautiful. And here you have the loops showing how to do a 3D raised pattern. It would have, the loom would have held this end up, and then they would have wove it coming down here. When you finger weave, you get these diagonals. And so they're incorporating these patterns into their designs. So these are water designs, water pattern designs, which you'll see in their pottery later on. Once these are still placed into the basketry, but that's a very important design, this design here. They're using color, so there was common colors at that time. Black and white was common, and they didn't have white, so this is where the dog hair comes in. So they're collecting the underfur of their dog. A dog that was black with white toes, or any dog that had 4 white feet, was a good dog. He could carry you into the other world when you passed away. But a dog that was pure black or pure with no white toes, he was going to be eaten, because he was not going to be able to serve his purpose to take you on the other side. Reds and yellows are ochres. Blacks are organic dyes, usually sumac, or even sometimes some bark. So now we know that white was the white fur, red and yellow are ochres. And so they're incorporating these colors into their patterns. And you can see this basket here. So this black ring on this basket is 3-leaf sumac boiled down to a paste, and then there's iron oxide added into it to hold it together. And then the yucca is, because it's string or sumac, and it has in between, let me tell you why this is in here. In between every one of these coils is a leaf of yucca. And this is 3-leaf sumac taken down to a real narrow piece, thin piece of material, and then wound around a sumac branch. But the colors are what, you know, I think everything, no matter what they made, it had some form of beauty. You know, it was pretty to look at, pretty, even though it had to go out and do a hard day's work, it was still pretty, you know. People had an eye for beauty even back then. Look at this pair. This was never worn. These were actually found this way in a cave. They're utilizing different materials at the toes. So up here where this one held from the loom, sometimes there's leather put in here. Sometimes there's different beads. There's, you know, making it a personal touch. And I think that there were people who were specialists, because when I look at collections, and I know they came from the same cave, or they came from the same site, you can see that artist, you know, how he created it. And then you'll see someone else who tried to make one, and you're like, oh, not this same guy, or maybe a pre-apprentice, you know. So you're seeing these people's works as a work of art. And it basically is, you know, here's the black, here's the white hair, dog hair. The white color in anything that they wore in the regalia, if you've ever gone to the pueblos, or you look at a painting and you'll see these feathers, they represent clouds. So these people, it not only gave it a personal touch, but a form of, you know, these are little cloud patterns made with the white dog fur. These are the different designs. I talked about the water pattern designs. You'll see a lot of these designs once basketry goes away and they settle permanently in a settlement or in a village. These patterns are applied to their pottery. And even in the 1600s, when the Spaniards were telling the Pueblo people that they could no longer use these pattern designs on their pottery, there were secret designs implemented in the flower structures that the Spaniards wanted the women to paint on the pots. So it's kind of fun to say, hey, there it is. There's the water pattern, or there's a vanyu, or there's, I know what that is, This is a woman's apron, and each woman would have her own personal apron. And this is, I just talked to Dr. Blimlin day before yesterday. He goes, oh, by the way, when you come back from Oklahoma, you're going to have to quarantine for 14 days. Why don't you start working on that apron? Oh, okay. So this is what I'm going to do when I get back from Oklahoma. And you can see that every woman had a personal apron. Sometimes they're called menstrual aprons. And I said that one time, and all these men like almost ran out the door. I don't want to touch it. Anyway, so it is about 32 feet. All these strands, and they were pulled up and then tied around the back. This little tump band. This little band is only to cover the pelvis. And the reason why it would cover the pelvis and be tied like that is so that it would put pressure on the pelvis as she was ovulating, and they weren't allowed in the back into the pueblo. So they were put in special caves, these women, as they went through their time. They were called moon caves, of course. So yucca is very absorbent. So they would take a yucca, the cordage just itself, like those wads that we saw earlier, and then they would put that in here and place it, and then pull these to the back, pull these strands to the back behind the woman, and then tuck it into this cord which was around her waist. So that would hold the menstrual pad in place. And again, her utilization of her dog hair, her own personal design, they would be hung up in the cave, and you knew it was yours when you had to go back. And though they love water, so you could clean these aprons real easily, clean them. So it's an interesting that all women, have to go through these things. But here's another basket. Again, they're not weaving on a loom. So a lot of these things are again, finger woven, and look how fine these threads are and these weaves. And if it wasn't, like I said, for archaeology or archaeologists in general, I wouldn't know what to do with a lot of these items. Tump bands were used to hold baskets on your forehead. You see several styles. Some were used for gathering wood. So you could take a tump band with about 3 feet of rope, gather your wood, and then bundle it and tie it to your head and go home and carry it a lot simpler. We're learning that the modern backpack is damaging the clavicles on small children because they're being loaded down with books. And you can see her here. She's gathering water in the what looks like a Papago woman. So tump bands, I saw them still using them in Oaxaca to carry wood and to bring stuff from the fields. So they're still being utilized, only not here anymore within the Pueblo. It's forgotten. That technology is lost. This was the last known photograph of a group of women from Cochiti making a rabbit fur blanket. So rabbits were snared, skinned, and then one pelt can go about 7 feet. If you know how to, remember I told you got to cut it in a circle, not strips. And then wind it around the cordage, which you're seeing here. So it'll go round and around. And yucca is spun 2 plies so that it opens and closes. And then they could put the end, once they wind this around, they'll open this yucca and then put the end of their rabbit fur strip in here and it'll lock. Then they'll reopen up here and start all over again, another strand. So this is the last known photograph of Pueblo women actually making a rabbit fur blanket. No one makes them anymore. Turkey feather, again, a lost technology. This one was at the museum in Santa Fe, and there's one small tear. They were usually for burials. So when you're born, you're given a blanket, a turkey feather blanket. As you grow old, the good thing about this is you can undo this corner, add more yucca cordage, and then add it to the weave of this blanket. So an average baby blanket was only like maybe 2 feet or 1 foot by 1 foot, or even smaller or larger than that. And then an adult size was 3 foot by 4 foot, average size for an adult. So Coronado comes here. He comes in the month of October, and it's so cold that the Rio Grande is frozen solid. He's able to drive his wagons across it to the Pueblo of Coronado, and he's not he makes a raid on the Pueblo village, and he's not taking women or children or pottery or food. He wants their turkey feather blankets because all his soldiers are freezing. He didn't realize that in this high desert that it snows. So he managed to knock over and take textiles and blankets off of, he actually, it's written or told the story that he stole 200 turkey feather blankets. It took me 18 months to finish one that was 2 feet by 3 feet. And that's gathering all the turkey feathers. That took 17,000 feathers to make that blanket. And the cordage was 190 feet of yucca cordage. The warp and the width combined. So again, making something beautiful. The one we made is all Merriam's and also Rio Grande turkeys. And then the yucca cordage was collected from, we call it roadkill yucca. Like if they're going to do remove yucca from a construction site, we ask, can we have that yucca? Because we're going to do this big project. So you can imagine it was probably abundant. There weren't, but these white spots are actually turkeys that were in a pen, and albinoism occurs if you have 2,000 turkeys. You're going to get, you know, this white turkey. So they collect that feather, and then before these feathers were applied, they would put the yucca cordage on this loom, a simple loom like this, 3 feet by 2 foot loom, and then figure out where they were going to put these white feathers. They would paint the string, the cordage, with red ochre. So every time they went to apply a feather, to wind a feather around the cordage, they would look for that red spot. Oh, here's a red dye. It has to have a white feather. So then they would wind the white feather and then go on. And then once all the feathers were applied to the cordage, as they put it on the loom, they would line all these feathers up to get these dots. So imagine doing that, you know. It'd take me longer than 18 months, I think. But just the thought of how beautiful, and not just turkey feathers, you're getting eagle feathers too for some children. And an eagle only gives you 7 or 8 plumes in his lifetime. So think about that, 17,000 feathers to make a blanket, and an eagle only gives 7 plumes in his life. They also made footwear for winter. A lot of people didn't know that yucca cordage was woven into a sock and then applied to another yucca plaited base, and then stuffed with elk fur and other materials to create a mukluk. So if you're looking at this yucca cordage, it is probably a quarter of an inch thick, and there's quite a bit of it. This design is called a loop design. So you can see these feathers here on this. These are not the plume feathers. These are the quill feathers of the turkey. So the wings and the tails, and they're split and then wound around this cordage. So as you're making this sock, because remember, I can knock out this yucca base down here in an hour, but you have to sew this sock on there. And as you're creating this sock, you have to do this loop pile. So see this little loop, this little area right here, and then it comes under and loops, and then goes back and loops, and then it comes in and loops. So this little space right here, once I come off this loop, I have to apply a turkey feather onto that little area, the fletch. Stop, go to the loop, apply the feather, go to the loop, apply another feather. So this was tedious work, but yucca is the base of almost all these garments and all these shoes. It's so durable. This is a religious item. So bluebirds, red-tailed hawk, blue jay. Over here you have a scarlet macaw with the blue feathers, and inside it's actually a scarlet macaw. I've seen this. It is not yucca. It is deer hide that this feathers are wound around. It's beautiful. And look at this fletch. It's split and then bundled and wound around. That's that example there. But this is part of our religion, our medicine. Zuni still has a bluebird clan. This Tonto shirt is what it's called. This is cotton. And so when cotton comes in around 1200s, yucca starts to fade away because cotton is more comfortable, it's cooler, it's easier to spin. Spindle whorls start appearing. You see this guy, he has his little spindle whorl. He's wearing his Tonto shirt. So this weave is called a sprang weave. So this is a braid, and it would have started longer up here. The replica Tonto shirt is so beautiful. This is the one that was found in the cave structure. And again, look at the water designs. Water, the waves, more water. Water was very important to us, still is. These are, again, yucca textiles and cotton textiles. And you're seeing a tie-dye, a resist dye being used. We're not sure how they're accomplishing this resist dye, if it's a wax, or are they using the same tie-dye, wrapping something around it to create those dots. But these tassels on any of these garments, they represent pollination, the corn tassels. So that is, Hopi, I think, is still using these tassels to identify family groups, represent maturity. And out here, when you look at a woman's manta in the north, when I was little, my grandma still used to make these and put these on the manta. And as I grow up, you don't see these anymore on the mantas. So that's how fast things are disappearing from the time I was little till, now. I think I want to bring those tassels back. I kind of like them. So dyeing the cordage and creating colors, they find that painting the textiles is a lot easier, and they can become more creative with their designs. So you're seeing a change. You get butterfly pattern designs, mountains, rivers. This is a real pretty design. And the same thing here. I don't know if it's just, we don't really want to go through all that and dye these anymore. So you're getting painted tump bands and painted blankets rather than dyeing the threads and weaving them together. They're still beautiful, but I think it's the time, nobody wants to take the time anymore. So things change. This is um, a rabbit net, and nobody hunts rabbits anymore except for Taos Pueblo, and they will put out a net, and not one like this. They are using modern nets, nylon and stuff. This is human hair. So you can spin anything, and human hair was like nylon, so it had that stretch, a little bit of give, where yucca doesn't have any elasticity, but it's held together with yucca cordage. Again, yucca being a base to all artifacts, all items, it's incredible that it still continued to be used. So the men would hold this long net. It's the length of a tennis net, basically. And then other men would carry rabbit sticks and drums and then herd the rabbits into these nets. And as the rabbit was snared in the net, they would use the clubs to club them and then take the rabbits to the center of the plaza and spread them all out. The old people got the best pick of the rabbit. Then the young people, the young children, then the moms and dads, you got whatever was left. So they were tending to the old ones first, then the children, then the adults. You see a prehistoric depiction of Pueblo life. I'm going to guess that it's in Chaco because of the parrots. They have parrot pins. They had eagle pens. You're getting mugs. There's that dog. I don't know if I'd eat him or not. He doesn't have white toes. And now a more kind of like they're gathering water here. Looks like Acoma. Wearing a manta, which is probably wool, gone to cotton. Not one piece of yucca on this whole item here, and all yucca here. Everything would have been yucca. So that's how quickly churro sheep comes in. Mantas are made of wool. Shawls are made of wool. Blankets are wool. Shoes are now leather, which is something brought in by the Athabascans as they migrate down. So change of a technology, but still talk stories about the yucca. In the cave paintings, we know that they were using resist dyes on, on cotton. Here you have the tassels on the men's, the tassels here. They're really important. They represent a lot of religious affairs, and I don't know if that's something I really want to try and bring back. I'm going to try. And the manta's tied on the right side. The men's wearing his wage, and this sash is called the seyang. And turkey feathers. So yucca has an incredible beauty. It was beautifully used in the past. And again, we're still learning more about it and still experimenting with it and trying to find more fascinating things to do with it. and I'm still reintroducing it to a lot of tribes, and so I've touched the tribes in Bishop, California, who used to make rabbit fur clothes with the yucca and rabbit fur. So I'm going to go out there and teach them. I have a lot of things to do still with yucca, but thank you for giving me this time, and I appreciate your group listening in.
Mary, thanks so much for the presentation. I had forgotten to mention that urge people to ask questions using the chat box. So if folks do have questions, please put them into the chat box and we can call them up. So I'm looking here to see, I see here's a couple questions. Do you know what kind of wood is used for bows?
There's you can use bow dart, which is dogwood, and then there's another one, locust. Here in New Mexico, a lot of the native locust or Indian locust was used, and there's certain, it has to cure, so all the sap goes down. So right now that these trees are falling asleep, now it's time to go harvest um, bow stays, and then you'll let them sit all winter, and then in the spring you start, you know, shaving them down. So if you can find a good locust, and a lot of I noticed a lot of the highway islands have that locust in there. So that's what I use. And then willow can be used, but it doesn't last long. So that would be considered an expedient bow.
Okay, thanks. That was that's very interesting. Now here's a question occurred to me. You kind of explained it later, but can you describe exactly what you mean by the water pattern? What exactly does that pattern look like that tells you water? I sort of got a vague idea now, but can you elaborate on it a little bit?
I'm going to take this back. Okay. This, let's see, that's a mountain, stars, let's see. This, see on this Tonto shirt, this is a wave. You know how water peaks and it comes up? These are waves, water waves. And the same here, see that peak? Does that help you?
Yeah. It just curious what you meant by the water pattern.
Yeah, so these water patterns get transferred from these textile designs onto pottery. So here's some here from Chaco. You're getting these designs on these pots because they were basketry designs, and baskets go away. My pueblo, nobody knows how to make baskets anymore. So Zuni is one of the last holds. Hopi is a last holder of that technology. And I've learned from the Zuni, and I'm learning from the Hopi also how to do basketry and try and influence others to bring it back.
I have, looks like one more comment here. This is from Nancy Singham. She said, this is so interesting in so many ways. Are there suggestions for ways to learn more?
About yucca or in general?
There's a lot of stuff that you covered here. It's not just yucca, but the whole stuff that was all used, you know, the human hair, the mice stuff that you talked about,
I think
rabbit blankets. So there's a lot that you talked about.
You can get on the OAS, the Office of Archaeological website, and we actually do tours and we talk about the plant usage and the animal usage, and you know, we'll actually go on site visits and discuss, what's going on with some of the pictoglyph and petroglyph patterns. And that's one way to learn more
Cool.
about what's going on.
Okay, I think, no, here's another one. Diane just came up with one. What kind of artifacts does Edge of Cedars Museum in Blanding, Utah have?
Oh, they have everything. They have the aprons, they have the shoes, they have the mukluk that I talked about, the snowshoes. They have a lot of cordage. Um, they have some of the best collection of Pueblo artifacts I've seen. Um, it's a great place to visit.
Sounds like a place I'd like to keep in mind.
I would, if you get a chance to go.
Here comes another question. This is from Gary and Penny Ho. Tohono O'odham in Arizona still make baskets and kind of specialize in the flatter ones like platters. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, the flat baskets are, they use like a, it's not sagebrush, but it is a bush, and they'll thin that down and create those baskets. And I think they also use that yucca that's red, that has the red flower. I've never tried to use that, but that's how they get the red color in some of their designs. Their flat basket is, as far as utilitarian, it would have been used for straining, like you have winnowing baskets, but mainly decoration now, I think.
Okay, here comes another question. How many threads to the inch are the fine pattern sandals? They look very intricate and time consuming.
They are very intricate and they are very time consuming. So thread is about 1/8 of an inch per thread. Um, so the double winding to get the 3D pattern is the trick. It is, you're going to have to create a little over 200 feet of cordage to create one of those sandals. And that's not dyeing it or anything else to create the interior patterns. You have to change the weft. But it's a challenge and I'm willing to take it.
It's extremely interesting. I don't see any more questions. Diane, I see Diane is muted. But anyway, Diane, do you want to make some comments?
Oh yeah, this is very great. It makes me want to go to that museum, the Edge of Cedars in Utah, and participate in any classes you would give. But I know that might be a while before we can do that.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting about the women having to go into a cave for a week. That's sort of like what we're doing now.
Yeah,
for a little bit
yeah,
longer.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Isolation. It was considered dirty, or your blood carried a lot of diseases or bad things. So, and another reason why, if she was allowed within the group of humans, their spirits still wandering around, could be bad, could be good. They don't want those bad ones to be reborn again into, the system. So they isolate and protect these women that are in that cave. It's a cool religion because the Comanches still practice it. You're not even supposed to be around your husband. You're supposed to go away.
Sounds
So you
like
go
a
to the
good
casino. Hey, you go to the casino for a week.
idea.
Just kidding. Any other questions?
Mary, when we were out in the Galisteo Basin, you know, for that chilies and sherds thing, and we were up, there was a cave and there was some petroglyphs above it, and I think you said that you thought that was one of the natural caves, that it was, I can't remember what the...
It had the moon design on it, so that was a moon cave for the women.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it'll have phases, you know, and what it's like. See, I coached girls basketball and softball and volleyball. So if one girl came in, everybody was, you know, in on it. So I'm assuming they would do the same thing, you know.
Yeah. This was great, Mary. Thank you so much.